The clock struck midnight when Megan heard the faint sound of footsteps outside her door. She froze, clutching the flashlight tighter. But what terrified her most wasn't the steps. It was the fact that she had been alone on the entire floor. Since check-in, her heart pounded as she stared at the wooden door, its surface smooth but scarred with age. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, until they stopped directly in front of her room. A cold draft seeped through the gap beneath the door, making her shiver despite the warmth of the summer night. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer came. Just silence, thick, suffocating, and unyielding. For a moment, Megan thought she might be imagining things. After all, the hotel was old, creaky, and prone to strange noises. That's what she told herself as she stood there, paralyzed by fear. But then she saw it. The shadow under the door shifted slightly, as though someone or something was standing just beyond. Megan had arrived at the Grand Hollow Hotel earlier that evening, seeking refuge from the chaos of her life. Divorced, jobless, and reeling from the death of her mother, she needed a place to escape, to disappear for a while. When she stumbled upon an ad for the secluded mountain hotel offering discounted rates, it seemed like fate. The drive up to the hotel had been eerie enough. Thick fog blanketed the narrow road, and the forest surrounding the property felt alive, almost watching her every move. As she pulled into the parking lot, the building loomed before her, a relic of another era. Its once grand architecture now appeared dilapidated, with peeling paint and broken windows that stared back like hollow eyes. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, with faded wallpaper and threadbare rugs. The receptionist, an elderly man with sunken cheeks and a monotone voice, barely acknowledged her presence. He handed over the key to room 312, without so much as a smile, and muttered something about keeping the noise down. "It's just me," Megan replied, trying to lighten the mood. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, leaving her to navigate the labyrinthine halls on her own. By the time Megan reached her room, exhaustion had set in. She threw her bag onto the bed and collapsed onto the mattress, too tired to unpack. The room itself was modest but clean, with floral patterned curtains and a small writing desk tucked into the corner. It wasn't luxurious, but it would do. Or so she thought. As the hours passed, the stillness of the hotel began to weigh on her. There were no other guests, not on this floor, at least, and the staff seemed to vanish after dark. Even the air felt heavier, pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. She tried to shake off the unease by reading a book, but the words blurred on the page. Her mind kept drifting back to the receptionist's cryptic warning. "Keep the noise down." What did he mean? Was there someone else here? Someone who didn't want to be disturbed? At first, she dismissed her paranoia as fatigue. But when the footsteps started, everything changed. It began subtly, an almost imperceptible creak in the hallway. Then came the rhythmic tapping, slow and deliberate, as if someone were walking barefoot across the hardwood floors. Megan sat upright, her pulse quickening. She glanced at the clock. 11:57 p.m. "Hello?" she called out, her voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" No response. She told herself it was probably one of the staff doing rounds, or maybe even the wind, playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't normal. The footsteps grew closer, stopping right outside her door. Her breath hitched as she tiptoed toward the entrance, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the doorknob. Should she open it? What if someone or something was waiting on the other side? Before she could decide, the handle jiggled ever so slightly. Megan stumbled backward, her heart racing. She grabbed the flashlight from the bedside table and held it like a weapon, ready to defend herself if necessary. But nothing happened. The handle stopped moving, and the silence returned, heavier than before. Unable to shake the feeling that she was being watched, Megan decided to investigate. She cracked opened the door cautiously, peeking into the dimly lit hallway. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with identical doors that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. But something caught her eye, a flicker of movement at the far end of the hall. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably human. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadow, staring directly at her. "Who's there?" Megan demanded, her voice firmer this time. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it turned and disappeared around the corner. Against her better judgment, Megan stepped into the hallway, flashlight in hand. Her footsteps echoed eerily as she approached the spot where the figure had vanished. When she rounded the corner, the hallway was empty, but not quite silent. A low whisper filled the air, soft and unintelligible, as though voices were murmuring just out of reach. Megan spun around, shining her flashlight in every direction, but saw no one. "Hello," she called again, her voice cracking. "This isn't funny." The whispers grew louder, overlapping and chaotic, until they became deafening. Megan clapped, her hands over her ears, dropping the flashlight in the process. It rolled across the floor, casting wild shadows on the walls. And then, suddenly, everything went quiet as Megan bent down to retrieve the flashlight. She noticed something etched into the wall, a single word scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Leave." Before she could react, the lights in the hallway flickered violently, plunging her into darkness. When they came back on, she found herself face to face with the same shadowy figure she'd seen moments ago. This time, however, it wasn't standing at a distant spot, it was right behind her. Megan screamed, spinning around to confront the apparition. But the hallway was empty once again. Gasping for breath, she bolted back to her room and slammed the door shut, locking it securely. Only then did she notice something chilling. The mirror above the dresser reflected not just her terrified face, but also a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her from the darkness of the room. Mark Carter adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror as he pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Hollow Hotel. His laptop bag sat on the passenger seat, stuffed with notes, audio recordings, and photographs related to his latest project, a deep dive into urban legends surrounding haunted hotels. He had been chasing this story for months, but something about the Grand Hollow felt different. The reviews were sparse, the history murky, and the few accounts he'd uncovered online described it as a place where bad things happen. As he stepped out of the car, the oppressive silence of the forest enveloped him. No birds chirped. No wind rustled the trees. It was as though nature itself avoided this place. Mark shook off the unease. He wasn't here to believe in ghosts. He was here to debunk them. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was walking into something far darker than he'd anticipated. At 34, Mark was a seasoned journalist who prided himself on exposing hoaxes and unraveling mysteries. Skepticism was his default mode, and he wore it like armor. Yet beneath his confident exterior lay unresolved pain, the disappearance of his younger sister Claire 10 years ago. Her case remained unsolved, her body never found. Rumors swirled that she had vanished near remote mountain town, not far from where the Grand Hollow stood today. Mark refused to entertain those rumors publicly, dismissing them as baseless speculation. Privately, however, he wondered if there might be some truth to them. That's why he chose this hotel, not just for its eerie reputation, but because it offered answers to questions he dared not ask aloud. Check-in was uneventful, though the receptionist gave Mark the same cold, detached treatment Megan had received. The man barely glanced at him as he handed over the key to room 305, just 2 floors below. Megan's room. "This floor will be quiet," the receptionist said, his voice monotone. "No disturbances." "Good," Mark replied, forcing a smile. "I need peace and quiet to work." He lugged his bag upstairs and settled into his room, which mirrored Megan's in layout and decor. Unlike her, however, Mark didn't waste time unpacking. He immediately booted up his laptop and began reviewing his research. Pages upon pages of interviews, articles, and cryptic forum posts filled the screen, each one hinting at strange occurrences within the hotel's walls. One particular account caught his attention: a woman claiming to have heard whispers coming from the halls late at night. According to her, the voices knew her name. Coincidence, Mark thought dismissively. People see what they want to see. Still, curiosity got the better of him. Around midnight, he decided to take a stroll through the corridors, camera in hand, hoping to capture evidence of anything unusual, or, more likely, proof that nothing existed beyond faulty plumbing and overactive imaginations. Mark hadn't gone far when he heard hurried footsteps behind him. He turned to see a disheveled woman clutching a flashlight, her face pale and wide-eyed. "You're not alone?" she asked breathlessly, her voice tinged with desperation. No," Mark replied, taken aback. "Who are you?" "I'm Megan," she said quickly. "Room 312. I think something's following me." Mark raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "Following you? Like what?" She hesitated, clearly struggling to find the words. "I don't know. A shadow, voices, something in the mirror." Mark crossed his arms, trying to maintain his composure. "Look, I get it, you're scared. But mirrors can play tricks, and shadows are just shadows. Have you considered maybe it's stress or exhaustion?" Megan glared at him, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You don't understand." "I saw it, glowing eyes, right behind me," Mark sighed. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered someone convinced they'd witnessed the supernatural. Usually, he walked away, chalking it up to imagination or paranoia. But something about Megan's intensity stopped him. Maybe it was the raw fear in her eyes, or the fact that her description eerily matched details from the journal entries he'd read earlier. "Fine," he said finally. "Let's check it out, together." The two returned to Megan's room, where she recounted everything she'd experienced since arriving at the hotel. Mark listened intently, jotting down notes and snapping photos of the word "leave" scratched into the wall. As Megan spoke, he noticed subtle inconsistencies in her story, moments where logic faltered and emotion took over. But then came the twist. When Mark examined the mirror above the dresser, he spotted faint smudges along its edges. Upon closer inspection, he realized they formed letters, another message, barely visible against the glass. "Help me." Megan gasped when he pointed it out. That wasn't there before. Mark frowned, his skepticism wavering. "Okay, this is weird, but how did it get there? And who wrote it?" Before either of them could answer, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, the mirror reflected not just their faces, but also a third figure. Standing between them, neither moved nor spoke. They simply stared at the reflection, frozen in terror. Desperate for answers, Mark suggested they explore the basement level of the hotel, rumored to house old records and artifacts from its past. Megan reluctantly agreed, though her hands trembled. As they descended the creaky staircase, in the dimly lit storage area, they discovered a dusty filing cabinet filled with yellowed documents and newspaper clippings. One article in particular grabbed Mark's attention. It detailed the tragic fire that destroyed part of the hotel decades ago, killing several guests and staff members. Among the victims was a young woman named Claire Carter. Mark's blood ran cold. For years, he had assumed his sister's disappearance was unrelated to the Grand Hollow. Now, staring at her name printed in black and white ink, he realized he had been wrong. "She was here," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My sister, she stayed here." Megan placed a hand on his shoulder, unsure of what to say. Before she could respond, they heard footsteps echoing nearby, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably heading toward them. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. A shadow loomed in the threshold, blocking the light from the hallway. Neither Megan nor Mark dared to move. Then a voice, soft, raspy, yet chillingly familiar, spoke from the darkness. "Mark," it said, "you shouldn't have come back." Mark froze, recognizing the voice instantly. It belonged to Claire. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Emily Dawson clutched her daughter's worn stuffed bunny as she stepped into the Grand Hollow Hotel. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. 3 years had passed since Lily went missing, and every lead, every tip, had turned into a dead end. But this time was different. A private investigator had traced Lily's last known location to the hotel, a place Emily swore she'd never visit again after her husband died in a car accident nearby. The lobby felt colder than she remembered. The same faded wallpaper, the same threadbare rugs. Even the receptionist seemed unchanged, an older version of the man who had checked her in years ago. He handed her the key to room 315 without meeting her eyes. "Welcome back," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Emily froze. "What did you say?" "Nothing," the man replied, turning away abruptly. She didn't press him. Instead, she carried her small suitcase upstairs, her heart heavy with dread. She wasn't here for rest or relaxation. She was here for answers and closure. At 42, Emily was a shell of her former self. Once vibrant and full of life, she now moved through the world like a ghost, haunted by memories of her daughter's laughter and the unanswered questions surrounding her disappearance. Photos of Lily lined the walls of her home, reminders of the happy times they'd shared before everything fell apart. Lily had been 8 when she vanished during a family vacation. Emily had searched frantically that day, calling out her name, until her voice gave out. When the police found no trace of her, they labeled it a runaway case. But Emily knew better. Lily wouldn't have left willingly, not without saying goodbye. Now, standing in room 315, Emily felt a strange mix of hope and despair. Hope that she might finally uncover the truth. Despair that the truth might destroy her. The first night, that evening, Emily unpacked her belongings methodically, placing Lily's bunny on the bedside table. She opened her laptop and began reviewing old case files, determined to piece together the fragments of her shattered past. As midnight approached, fatigue set in, and she decided to lie down for a moment. But sleep didn't come easily. Around 1 a.m., she heard faint scratching sounds coming from the wall beside her bed. At first, she thought it was mice or rats, common in such an old building. But then the noises grew louder, more deliberate, forming patterns that sounded almost like words. "Mommy!" Emily bolted upright, her pulse racing. The voice was unmistakable. It belonged to Lily. "Lily?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Is that you?" There was no response, just silence. Then, slowly, words began appearing on the wall. Opposite the bed, etched as if by an invisible hand. "I'm here. Help me." Emily scrambled to grab her phone, snapping photos of the message before it faded away. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, but the call failed repeatedly. No signal. Frustrated and terrified, she grabbed the flashlight and ventured into the hallway, hoping to find anyone who could help. In the dimly lit corridor, Emily collided with 2 figures hurrying toward her. One was a frazzled-looking woman, holding a flashlight. The other was a man with a camera slung over his shoulder. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, clutching Lily's bunny tightly. "I'm Megan," the woman said quickly. "And this is Mark. We're investigating some strange things happening here." Before Emily could respond, Mark interjected. "We've seen messages too, scratched into walls, written in mirrors." "What did yours say?" Emily hesitated, unsure whether to trust them. But the desperation in their voices mirrored her own. She showed them the photo on her phone, the chilling plea for help. Mark frowned, studying the image. "This is exactly what we've been dealing with. Someone or something is trying to communicate. And I think it's my daughter," Emily added. her voice breaking. "Her name is Lily. She disappeared 3 years ago." Megan gasped. 3 years? That matches one of the dates we found in the basement records. Realization dawned on Mark. If Lily stayed here, then maybe she's still trapped in this place. The trio returned to the basement, where Mark and Megan had previously discovered the article about Claire Carter. Together they sifted through more documents, piecing together a horrifying pattern. Guests who vanished under mysterious circumstances, only to reappear later as shadows or echoes within the hotel's walls. Among the files, they found a journal belonging to a former housekeeper. Its pages were filled with frantic scribbles detailing strange occurrences, whispering voices, disappearing objects, and sightings of ghostly figures roaming the halls. One entry stood out. "They don't leave, not really. The hotel keeps them here, feeding off their pain." Emily recoiled, clutching Lily's bunny even tighter. "Feeding off their pain? What does that mean?" Mark shook his head, equally disturbed. "It means this isn't just a haunted hotel. It's alive, and it thrives on suffering." As they debated their next move, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, the journal was gone. Back in the main lobby, they encountered the receptionist once more. This time, he didn't ignore them. His sunken eyes locked onto theirs with a chilling intensity. "You shouldn't be digging into things that don't concern you," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried." Mark stepped forward, defiant. "Why? Because you're hiding something? Because you know what happened to our loved ones?" The receptionist smirked. "You think I'm the villain? Look closer, Mr. Carter. Your sister chose to stay. Just like little Lily chose to stay." Emily lunged at him, screaming, "Liar! My daughter would never choose this." But the man simply vanished, melting into the shadows as though he'd never existed. Shaken and confused, the group retreated to Megan's room to regroup. As they discussed their options, Emily noticed something strange. The mirror above the dresser was cracked, its surface rippling like water. Slowly, an image began to form, a young girl with blonde hair and wide, frightened eyes. "Lily!" Emily cried, rushing toward the mirror. But before she could touch it, the reflection shifted. Instead of Lily, she saw herself, but older, gaunt, and hollow-eyed. Beside her stood Mark and Megan, equally emaciated and lifeless. Then, the mirror spoke, its voice echoing through the room. "To save them, you must join them." The glass shattered, sending shards flying in all directions. When the chaos subsided, Emily realized she was alone. Megan and Mark were gone. Emily woke to the sound of faint sobbing. At first, she thought it was her own voice, echoing in the empty room. But as she sat up, disoriented, she realized the cries were coming from somewhere else, close yet distant, as if they existed in another dimension. "Lily?" she whispered, clutching her daughter's stuffed bunny like a lifeline. Her heart raced as she scanned the darkened room. Megan and Mark were gone, leaving her alone in a nightmare that felt increasingly real. Then from the shadows, a figure emerged, a translucent form of a young girl with blonde hair and wide, tear-filled eyes. It was Lily, Mommy. The apparition murmured, reaching out a pale hand. "Help me." Emily lunged forward, desperate to hold her daughter. But the moment her fingers brushed against the ghostly figure, Lily vanished, leaving behind only an icy chill. Panic set in as Emily stumbled into the hallway, calling out for Megan and Mark. The hotel seemed alive now, its walls pulsating faintly as though breathing. The air grew heavier with each step, pressing down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. She found them, or rather, what was left of them, in the grand ballroom on the second floor. Megan sat hunched over in a corner, muttering incoherently, while Mark paced back and forth, his camera dangling uselessly from his neck. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "What happened?" Emily demanded, shaking Megan gently. "Where have you been?" Megan looked up, her expression vacant. "It showed me everything. My life, my mistakes. I can't escape it." Mark stopped pacing and turned to Emily, his voice hoarse. "The hotel, it's feeding on us, showing us our worst memories, our deepest regrets. If we don't find a way out soon, it'll consume us completely." Emily shook her head, refusing to believe him. "No, we're not dying here, not without finding Lily." But deep down, she felt the truth of his words. The longer they stayed, the weaker they became, not just physically, but emotionally. Every memory, every failure, played out before their eyes like a twisted movie reel. Determined to fight back, the trio returned to the basement, hoping to uncover more clues about the hotel's origins. Among the dusty shelves, they discovered a locked door marked "Staff Only." Using a crowbar Mark had brought earlier, they pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. At the bottom, they found a hidden chamber filled with artifacts, old photographs, journals, and strange relics arranged in ritualistic patterns. In the center of the room stood a pedestal holding a blackened mirror, its surface swirling with ominous energy. "This is it," Mark said, his voice trembling. "This mirror, it's the source of the hotel's power." Emily approached cautiously, peering into the glass. Instead of her reflection, she saw flashes of Lily trapped inside, crying for help. Behind her, Megan gasped as her own reflection morphed into a grotesque version of herself, screaming silently. "We need to destroy it," Mark declared, grabbing a nearby chair and raising it above his head. "If we break the mirror, maybe we can free everyone." But before he could strike, a familiar voice stopped him cold. "Don't." They turned to see the receptionist standing in the doorway, flanked by two shadowy figures. His once stoic demeanor was gone, replaced by a sinister grin. "You don't understand," he said, stepping closer. "Breaking the mirror won't save anyone. It will unleash something far worse." As the group hesitated, the receptionist revealed his true identity. He was one of the original architects who designed the hotel. Decades ago, he and his partners had performed a forbidden ritual to bind the souls of the dead within the building, ensuring eternal prosperity for themselves. But the ritual went wrong, trapping them alongside their victims. "The hotel doesn't feed on pain," he admitted bitterly. "It feeds on hope. Every time someone tries to leave or fight back, it grows stronger. Your friends upstairs, they're already lost. And so are you." Mark lunged at him, enraged. "You son of a bitch, you've been lying to us this whole time." The receptionist sidestepped effortlessly, his movements unnervingly fluid. With a snap of his fingers, the two shadowy figures advanced, pinning Mark and Megan to the ground. Emily backed away, clutching Lily's bunny tightly. "Please," she begged. "Just let me save my daughter." The man smirked, gesturing toward the mirror. "Save her? Fine, step through the glass, and you'll be reunited forever. But know this, once you cross over, there's no coming back." Torn between desperation and fear, Emily stared at the mirror. Inside, Lily continued to cry, reaching out for her. Megan and Mark shouted warnings, urging her not to trust the receptionist. "He's lying," Megan screamed. "He wants you to sacrifice yourself." But Emily couldn't ignore the ache in her heart, the overwhelming need to hold her daughter. Again, slowly she reached out, her fingers grazing the mirror's surface. The glass rippled like water, pulling her closer. "Emily, no!" Mark yelled, breaking free from the shadows long enough to grab her arm. "Think about what you're doing. This isn't real." For a split second, doubt flickered in Emily's mind. Was this truly Lily, or just another trick of the hotel? She glanced at the receptionist, whose smug expression confirmed her worst fears. With a surge of anger, she pulled away from the mirror and grabbed the crowbar from Mark's hands. Raising it high, she brought it down with all her strength, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. The room erupted in chaos as a deafening roar filled the air. The walls began to crumble, and the ground shook violently beneath their feet. The receptionist shrieked, his body dissolving into ash as the hotel's power unraveled. "Run!" Mark shouted, dragging Megan to her feet. Emily followed, clutching Lily's bunny as they sprinted up the stairs. Behind them, the hotel collapsed in on itself, consumed by flames. They burst through the front doors just as the roof caved in, sending a plume of smoke billowing into the night sky. Gasping for breath, they collapsed onto the grass, watching as the Grand Hollow burned to the ground. For a moment, it seemed like they'd escaped, but then Emily noticed something horrifying in her arms. Lily's bunny was gone. And standing a few feet away, smiling faintly, was the receptionist. "Did you really think it was over?" he asked, his voice echoing eerily. Before they could react, the world around them dissolved into darkness. The darkness enveloped them like a suffocating shroud. Emily blinked, disoriented, as her surroundings shifted from the burning wreckage of the Grand Hollow Hotel to an unfamiliar corridor. The air smelled damp, heavy with decay. Megan and Mark stood beside her, equally confused, their faces etched with exhaustion. "Where are we?" Megan whispered, clutching her arms tightly around herself. Before anyone could answer, the receptionist appeared at the end of the hallway, his figure flickering like a faulty light bulb. His grin was wider now, more menacing. "You destroyed my prison," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "But you didn't destroy me." Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but defiant. "What do you want from us? Haven't we suffered enough?" The man tilted his head, studying her as though she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Suffering isn't punishment, it's fuel. And you've given me more than I ever dreamed possible." Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to shift, splitting apart to reveal a swirling void. One by one, they tumbled into the abyss, landing in what appeared to be a vast cavernous room. The walls were lined with countless mirrors, each reflecting distorted versions of themselves. In some reflections, they saw their happiest moments. Mark reuniting with Claire after years apart, Megan laughing with friends during better days, Emily holding Lily as a baby. In others, they witnessed their worst failures, the choices that haunted them, the people they'd let down. "This is your judgment," the receptionist announced, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "Face your truths or remain trapped here forever." Emily turned to Megan and Mark, her eyes filled with determination. "We can't give up, not now. Whatever these mirrors show us, it's not real. It's just trying to break us." Mark nodded, though his hands shook visibly. "She's right. We stick together, no matter what." As they approached the mirrors, each character was forced to confront their deepest fears and regrets. For Emily, her mirror showed Lily, older now, standing alone in a desolate playground. "You abandoned me," the girl accused, tears streaming down her face. "You stopped looking for me." Emily fell to her knees, overwhelmed by guilt. But then she remembered the stuffed bunny clutched in her hand, a symbol of her love and determination. "No," she said firmly. "I never gave up on you. And I won't start now." With that, the mirror cracked, its image fading away. For Megan, her reflection depicted a younger version of herself, screaming accusations about past betrayals. "You ruined everything," the shadow Megan shouted. "Your mistakes cost us everything." Megan flinched, memories flooding back of relationships lost and trust broken. For a moment, she believed the lie, but then she recalled the strength it took to survive. "I made mistakes," she admitted aloud, "but I'm still here. Still fighting." The mirror shattered, freeing her from its hold. For Mark, his reflection showed Claire, alive and well, but furious. "You left me behind," she spat. "You didn't care enough to find me." Mark clenched his fists, battling the wave of self-loathing threatening to consume him. "I failed you, Claire," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But I'm here now, and I'll make this right." The mirror exploded into shards, leaving Mark shaken but resolute. Once all 3 mirrors were destroyed, the receptionist reappeared, his form flickering erratically. "Impressive," he sneered. "But you're forgetting one thing: you're still inside my domain." "That's where you're wrong," Emily countered, stepping forward. "This place thrives on pain and regret, but we've faced our truths. We've forgiven ourselves. Without our suffering, you have no power." The man's grin faltered, his body beginning to dissolve. "No, you can't. We already did," Mark said, his voice steady. "It's over." With a final ear-splitting scream, the receptionist vanished, leaving the trio surrounded by silence. The cavern began to collapse, forcing them to run toward a distant light. As they emerged, they found themselves outside the ruins of the Grand Hollow Hotel, the morning sun casting golden rays over the charred remains. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They simply stood there, breathing in the fresh air, allowing the weight of their ordeal to settle down. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Do you think it's really gone?" Mark glanced at her, then at Megan. "I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that we survived, together." Megan nodded, managing a small smile. "And we're stronger for it." Emily looked down at her hands, realizing the stuffed bunny was back in her grasp. Though she couldn't explain how, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Whether Lily was truly gone or waiting somewhere beyond, she knew she'd done everything she could. As they parted ways, each carrying the scars of their journey, they shared a silent understanding. Sometimes, the greatest horrors aren't ghosts or monsters, they're the pain and guilt we carry within ourselves. Only by facing those truths can we begin to heal. Later that day, as Emily drove away from the mountains, she pulled over at a roadside diner. On the table beside her coffee cup lay a note someone had left behind. "Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find who you really are." She stared at the words, feeling a strange mix of sadness and hope. For the first time in years, she smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood. The real monsters weren't outside, they were inside. And she had faced them. The end.